It's what you would expect if there's an awakening going on to love, and that God is at work to try and unveil who he is. Hopefully, none of these guys will get drawn into the religious mindsets of, the stuff that we've been set free from. We don't want them getting drawn into that. So it would be worth, legislating for protection around them. A, from that religious stuff that they could get drawn into, but also B, from those that want to discredit them and who would bring out their past and the other things that they have done in the past, which obviously is part of the reason why they were looking for a solution in their life in the first place. But people can discredit people. I know Russell Brand has had a lot of people coming out from his past behavior from years ago. And it's really difficult when God's forgiveness and grace and mercy are such that he's wiped that slate clean, whereas actually in the world, people don't show mercy like that. And there's no statute of limitations on people's past discretions, which I'm not saying we should just ignore them, but ultimately we need to see and treat people in love and by forgiving them, so that we let that go as well. And I think it's important for people in the public eye that are protected, and we do legislate for their protection, because of course God can use them powerfully in lots of different circles to see, hey, this life has been transformed, and I'm all for that. But obviously celebrity has its consequences, and no doubt people will look to undermine anything that he's doing by bringing up and dragging up his past. And that's just life in this sort of celebrity age, in that way. But it's great, it's really good that people are discovering God, and hopefully they'll discover the true God and not just the sort of God they may have been sold. And I'm sure God will reveal himself to someone who's hungry and searching for truth and reality, but it's important that Christians don't get on the bandwagon of condemnation for his past indiscretions, to which all of us have them. There'll be those who are suspicious. I don't know who's around him. Hopefully people who can ground him in relationship rather than getting him into, religion. And obviously you don't have to get on your knees and pray, do you, in a sense, but and it might be cute from one perspective but you want him to have the sort of maintain the innocence of a relationship and not get drawn into stuff and not be used. There are a lot of Christians out there who will use celebrities and put them on the, oh wow, and expose them to issues which they shouldn't have to face. Why should they be paraded as a celebrity Christian, which can put them under a lot of pressure, and is not something I would want to do to people. Now, let God use them in the way that God wants to use them, rather than some, I don't know who might do it, but usually some TV celebrity or whatever else, or some Christian TV guy will get them on board and then expose them to lots of people, and they may not be ready to handle that. Give them some time to find their feet with God and to learn, about God's love without the pressure of having to perform and be paraded. And it was always the case. I mean, in the past, when we saw people who were saved from drugs, churches wanted them around to give their testimony, and they sort of fed on that and the sort of celebrity of it, and that fed into their needs for acceptance, which often sort of came crashing down if they weren't carefully protected. So parading them around churches doing their testimony didn't really do them any good. Looking back, better they gave, okay, share your testimony in 12 months' time. when you are, more mature, and you're not subject maybe to the need for people's approval and everything else. And we had probably 3 or 4 really high profile drug addicts who were saved, genuinely saved, but were under a huge lot of pressure, and people used them, and not all of them made it. Some of them, and some of them years later struggled. So it's one of those things that you want people to have the space to find their own relationship with God and not be paraded. But it is one of those things. Someone's in the public eye one way or another, is a risk for those people, and hopefully they'll discover and flow with God in the future, and I'm sure God will use that. So it is good, and I would expect lots of more people to have found God who are not necessarily sharing it publicly. And I think that might be wise for some people to keep it to themselves. Not that they're afraid or not they're ashamed of it, but it's just wisdom to enable them to have the space to grow and mature. And later on, then when they've got a solid testimony of more wisdom and maturity, then there's the ability for them to share that with the history of it, and say, yeah, I've worked this through over the last few years without being in the public eye. And I think that's wiser for some people. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.